Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up later in the show, we'll see Beyond Bollywood, an exhibit about Indian Americans in America. But first, Matt O'Lane got a chance to sit down with a special guest.
And my guest today is Allison Veselka with the Barnes County Museum in Valley City. Welcome to Prairie Pulse, Allison.
Hello.
You're here to talk about a major undertaking you've been doing for a few years, but first off, tell folks a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from originally.
Okay. My name is Allison Jean Veselka. I grew up in Tower City and lived there most of my life. Graduated from Maple Valley in 2009 and went to college at Valley City State and graduated in 2013. Mm-hmm. And ever since I graduated, I've been working at the museum. So.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, you came to Wes Anderson, right, with a idea to do massive research about women in the military in Barnes County. Can you tell us how and when this started?
It's about 3 years now. We had an intern at the museum, and we needed to do a final project for her. And I figured we had enough to make a small little exhibit. We had a few uniforms, which I found out we had more in our collection. And we also had a few items, some posters, and Wes had done a little bit of research on women's role on the home front for a prior exhibit in 2000. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of coupled this exhibit together, and it kind of sparked some curiosity in me, wondering if there were more. And the Barnes County Museum has the actual bound Times record newspapers. And I started going through those, and I uncovered a lot. So, and that's where it kind of started.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you say a lot, stuff that people didn't know about, I assume?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, there was a lot more women than I expected that had went into service. So, women who went into Women's Army Corps. Before I didn't know about the Navy Waves or mm-hmm. the Coast Guard SPARS or some of the organizations that women had served on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about researching something like this? Just take me through how it started and all the work you've done.
Well, like I said, a lot of it is through newspaper. It started with the Times record. I started with World War II era, and then I figured why not go through Korean War. So I started going through the Korean War era newspapers and jumped back to World War I for the centennial. So I did that. And then, I was researching all these women from Barnes County, and I was seeing these obits for some of these women elsewhere throughout North Dakota. And that kind of sparked the curiosity to expand the project.
Mm-hmm. Now this goes through the 90s, right?
Yes.
So
yep.
You go through Vietnam and Iraq and all that stuff as mm-hmm. well, correct?
Well, and there's one uniform that we had downstairs that belonged to Nicolette Lentmeyer. She was from mm-hmm. Sanborn, and she's still in service with the North Dakota National Guard.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now we just had the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Can you talk about women's role in World War I?
Well, World War I, we start to see women kind of push their foot in the door, as it were. Women, of course, before that time, they were primarily nurses. During World War I, actually before World War I, the Army Nurse Corps and Navy Nurse Corps were created. And so those organizations kind of flourished during World War I. And most of the women you see serving in North Dakota during that time, they were nurses.
Wow. Were there quite a few from Barnes County?
I think more throughout the state.
Okay.
There was a few from Barnes County, but not as many as I initially thought there would be.
Mm-hmm. Now, by World War II, though, we see a more expansive role. Can you tell me what you found there?
Well, so we still have the Army Nurse Corps and the Navy Nurse Corps during World War II. But we also have the Women's Army Corps, which was actually founded in 1942. And actually, there's only one picture of a guy in our exhibit, and it's of Gilman Mudgett. And Gilman, his family, they have an extensive history of military veterans in their family going back to the Revolutionary War. But Gilman, he was from Valley. He was in charge of creating the outline for the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps that would eventually turn to the Women's Army Corps. And eventually, no one expected for it to grow as fast as it did. The plan had to be scrapped. And Franklin Roosevelt actually got rid of the auxiliary part. He officially declared it as part of the Army. They also had the Navy waves,
Right.
the Coast Guard spars. Trying to think, they had the Women's Marine Reserves, so the USMC. And we also had a group called the Cadet Nurse Corps. And actually, North Dakota graduated about 1,000, more than 1,000 cadet nurses. And it was a program that was ran through several hospitals throughout the state, including St. Luke's and St. John's here in Fargo, and Mercy Hospital in Valley City. So they had all these organizations, and all these women joined. It was a time, you know, World War II, a bit more patriotic than I'm finding out in later wars.
Right.
But World War II, they just did what they could. Some of the women I talked to, they're so humble about it. They said, oh, it was nothing. I was just doing it to help my country.
Right.
And it's more than nothing. I mean, what they did is amazing.
I want to get to a couple specific women soon here that did some amazing things, but what are some other surprising or interesting stories you found, individual stories in Barnes County or throughout the state?
I talked to a woman named Ruth King Croxon. She's in California at the moment, still alive, 97, and still, I mean, her mind is still there, and she still remembers her service vividly. She was originally from Wyoming, and she served in the Navy waves during World War II, and she talked about, she went to Valley City State Teachers College, and when she graduated, she went into teaching. I'm not sure where, but she went into teaching. And she had went to use the phone in the office one day, and she seen the Navy Wave brochure, and she picked it up, and she's like, I'll fill this out. And of course, the sad thing is that she had her friend join up at the same time, and her friend's mom had tuberculosis. And so she found out that her friend had tuberculosis through taking the physical exam for the Navy. And she ended up going, she made the mistake of going in the summer, and it was really warm when she did physical training. She took her training at Hunter College in New York. And then she went to storekeeper school, I believe, in Georgia. And once she graduated, she said she traveled halfway across the country to California. And she worked as she worked basically as a chief storekeeper in an office. And there was one time she had to face off against a visiting general. He asked her to do something that she didn't have the clearance to do. And she basically stood her ground. She said she couldn't do it because she didn't have the clearance. And he told her, I'm going to put you on report. And it never happened because her commanding officer backed her up and told him, you know, she can't do that.
Yeah. Tell us about the Elizabeth Gates story and who she is. This is a good one.
I love this story. So most of what I know about her is that she was a graduate of Valley City State. She graduated in 1935, and she actually taught in Jamestown and Grand Forks. So what I knew about her is that she went to the Women's Army Corps, and she was one of the first 3 North Dakota women to join. And she was one of the very first to be accepted into the WAC, Officer Candidate School. And that's as far as I knew, that she was part of General Arnold's staff during World War II, and that's all the articles would say. But I got hold of her son.
Okay.
And some of the things he sent me some pictures of her. And a newspaper article from the Jamestown Sun, they had interviewed her. And the article explained her service and explained it more in depth to the point where I was kind of in shock. She was serving with Ultra Intelligence during World War II. So she was in charge of going forth between the Atlantic and Pacific theaters of the war. And she would be reporting on enemy positions and movements to Generals Hap Arnold, George
Air
Kenny.
Force, right?
Yep.
Right.
George Kenny. I think Roosevelt as well, and Eisenhower. So, I mean, she was reporting to all these men, and she was actually with Eisenhower when they rolled through the concentration camps, so she was one of the first to see those.
Wow. And she was again from where in North Dakota?
Well, she was from Jamestown.
Jamestown. Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing. And then another woman had something to do with the Nuremberg trials. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Harriet Zetterberg Margulies, and she was from Valley City, little old Valley City. She graduated from the high school and went to the college, but you know, she was incredibly smart. Her nephew still lives in the area, and he said that she was just the smartest woman he had never known. She ended up going to the University of Wisconsin, and she got a law scholarship to Yale. So she went to school for law. During World War II, she ended up working with the War Department in the legal division. I think they call it the Economic Warfare Division. And she was sent overseas in that role in 1944. And not long after, I found out in the article in the newspaper, she got married, secretly married. It was kind of a surprise. And the man that she married ended up becoming part of the War Crimes Commission.
Okay.
Yep. And so she followed not long after, and it was kind of a scandal because they shared a room, but not a lot of people knew they were married. But she was eventually transferred to the War Crimes Commission as well. And she was a lawyer during the Nuremberg trials. She was in charge of going through the papers and diaries and speeches of Hans Frank, who was governor of occupied Poland. And she, of course, I mean, she went through this, she did all this hard work, and I got a picture from the Holocaust Museum of her sitting. She wasn't able to read her brief that she had written up. As a woman, she was unable to present. So
that's a great story. Tell me about your family connections to the military. That's a lot there, isn't it, with your own family?
Yeah, I've been, you know, Ancestry.com has been a big part of my research as well, going through that and seeing what I can find. And my cousin has been working on some of the family history too. But I found out that we had a few Rosie Riveters in the family, so women working in the plane factories. I also recently just found out my grandma's aunt, she would be the sister of my grandma's dad. Mabel Gray was an Army nurse. And it turns out that she went into nursing school before World War I, and she was working as a nurse during the conflict. And then she finished up her schooling afterwards. So.
What kind of help did you get, or continue to get, from relatives and women and people contacting you?
Oh, they are the biggest help. I mean, I send out these handwritten letters. Once I find new names in the newspaper, I usually send them to, there's a woman who helps behind the scenes, Carol Faulkner, and she, by some kind of magic, she finds these addresses and surviving family members, and if these women are still alive, in some cases they are. But she sends them to me, and I write handwritten letters. I don't know how many I've sent off, but I've sent a lot off. And, you know, a lot of times I don't hear back, but sometimes I do. We get a phone call or we get a letter. And sometimes there are pictures, and sometimes I get emails. So, but there's one woman, actually, I'm very close to her still. Her name is Sandy Lewis. I believe she's all the way in Illinois. And her mom was actually one of the first 3 North Dakota women to enter the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps. That's Merle Fodness. And she has another connection to Grand Forks. And her parents ended up living in Wimbledon during World War II.
Okay.
But I remember I sent a letter to her brother. And I get a call one day at the museum, and it's her. And she was tickled pink, and she was gonna get all this stuff, and you know, I still call her periodically and ask her how she's doing, and she's kind of like family.
Yeah. You speak to groups, right? Too. You go out and speak, and people can come to the museum and see the exhibit as well. Take me through those two things.
Well, recently we had a PEO group come in, and they asked me if I could do a tour of the exhibit in half an hour, and I did that. And I actually did a lecture at the museum, I think it was last year. And I mean, I don't even know how long it was. Wes told me to keep it under an hour. He says, well, we'll leave you here, we'll just shut off the lights. But yeah, so I mean, we have groups come in, school tour groups, and you know, I think the teacher, she has them write down notes, what they like about the exhibit, what they take away from it, and we get these cards, and they're the sweetest things. You read their 8th graders, and some of them, a lot of the girls say, I didn't know women served as much as they did.
So it's eye-opening to people.
Yep.
Yeah. And the reaction is good from whoever you talk to?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know, with some kids, you know, you never know when they're going to come in, what they're interested in. And sometimes they're just going to the museum to get out of school.
Exactly.
But I don't know. There's some kids, though, who just, they come in to the museum and their eyes light up because I mean, we have an old player piano at the museum.
Right.
And all these other stuff, and things that they don't see, I mean, on a regular basis.
Right. Now, you've expanded this to the whole state.
Yes.
What does that involve? Mostly newspapers? Do you go out and visit people? What do you do?
Visiting people is a little bit hard.
Yeah.
But Wes and I recently took a trip to Bismarck, and that allowed me, we kind of got a sneak peek behind the scenes at their archives, and since they remodeled. But we also got to do some research in their archives. I didn't have enough time. We'll have to definitely go back. But they had some items in their archives that there was some items on a WAC named Roberta Burr, and there was items on an Army nurse, Irma Block, who was actually at Pearl Harbor. So.
And tell me a little bit about the museum, just in general, what people can see at the Barnes County Museum.
Oh boy. Well, we have Gundy now. We used to have Bob, but now we have Gundy, who is a Triceratops.
Okay.
I believe we have a 1907 Cadillac for the winter. The guy called us up asking if we wanted to kind of store it and display it for the winter, and we said, why not? So, and we also have the oldest car in the state, which is Wes's 1901 Oldsmobile. We have the Women at War exhibit, which has been my baby.
And that's up for quite a while, I'm sure, and you're going to move things in and out, I assume?
Yep. I know we have a Civil War exhibit that's been up for about 5 years, and I mean, we've talked about moving things around a bit more. So we have stuff on men's roles during World War II, stuff on Barnes County communities, and also we also have a scale model of the Highline. We have the player piano. So.
Okay. We're out of time. If people want to get a hold of you with stories of women in the military, what's the best way to reach you?
Probably at the museum. We're located on the Central Avenue, 315 Central Avenue North.
They can just call there?
Yep, okay. You can call me at the museum. The number is 815-0966.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for coming. Good job.
Thank you for having me.
Allison Veselka has been my guest on Prairie Pulse. Stay tuned for more.
A wonderful traveling Smithsonian exhibit called Beyond Bollywood, Indian Americans Shape the Nation is currently on display at the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County in Moorhead. A big part of the exhibit profiles contributions from Indian Americans in the Fargo-Moorhead region, ranging from medical doctors to college professors to technology field professionals. Here's a look.
I like the fact that it's my story, and it's the story of Indian Americans that have come to this country and called America their home. And I think what I want people to take away is, though we try hard to keep the traditions of our home country, we also try equally hard to assimilate with the people that we work with every day, the people that we meet socially. And I think it's the same values that we try to inculcate in our children. You know, if everything was great and awesome in our country, we wouldn't have come here.
The exhibit's called Beyond Bollywood, Indian Americans Shape the Nation, and it comes from the Smithsonian Institution. It's about the Indian American immigrant experience. Why did they come here? When did they come here? It's traveling around the country, and wherever it goes, it kind of snowballs. Whatever community is hosting it is encouraged to present the history of their local history with Indian American immigration. We have included, for the first time, the history of people from India coming to North Dakota and western Minnesota. Really, it was about 2 years ago that we began looking into this exhibit. Dr. Vijay Gaba is on our board of directors. He's kind of a champion of Indian culture and a promoter of it.
When they came up with this proposal in our meeting, and I got so excited, I said, this will be very good project over here. And they wanted to recognize the Indian American of Fargo-Moorhead area, how they are shaping the Fargo-Moorhead area in different speciality, especially in teaching, in IT department, in research department, in health system, in taxi driver, in motel business, in bringing yoga from there. And then they came up with the idea of this exhibition, and they said they are beyond Bollywood. Beyond Bollywood means they are not limited to only Bollywood dancing and filming and all these things. Their contribution is much more than that.
I think one of the first exhibits that people would see is the kitchen, where we have some Indian spices and then the pressure cooker. That's such an integral part of Indian cooking because we eat a lot of the dals or legumes, and those are really hard, and so they need to be softened in the pressure cooker. There is information about how when people come from any country to this country, they come with such little baggage, maybe one suitcase, but as time goes on, you have a house and a family and things that you can't dispose of. Then, you know, there is an exhibit about physicians in this area and other people in the medical field. There's an exhibit about the teaching community, particularly the contribution of Indian Americans to NDSU. Then there is the religious exhibit. India is an amalgamation of religions. Though Hinduism is still the most popular religion there, there is a considerable proportion of Hindus and Christians and Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, and a small proportion of Jews. So there is a religion exhibit here.
We are blessed that they thought about us in a small city in Fargo-Moorhead area, and they sent that exhibition over here. And they always encourage us to incorporate about your local involvement of Indian American in this exhibition. And if you see most of this exhibition, I will say about 60% came from Smithsonian and 40% local Fargo-Moorhead Indian American contribution in this area is showing that.
So it was professors at first, then in the 1970s and 1980s, this is when we found that doctors from India could be the solution to our rural healthcare shortage of doctors. So you have doctors like the Nagalas in Oaks and the Sarpals in Beach who came here and kept those hospitals open and expanded those hospitals. And so a wave of Indian doctors came starting in the 70s, but growing in the 80s, and it's still happening today. Minnesota and North Dakota are the two states that rely most by percentage on Indian doctors.
Because of limited other resources like for sports and all other activity, they want that their kids should at least do more education and they can shine. And now you can see all over the world, the Indians are there in most of the educated institute, and their percentage, especially in IT, healthcare, and the businesses service. That is very important. It's required for everyone to be educated in India. I want that everyone should visit this exhibition, and we have a stage in the exhibition for some weekly or sometime bi-weekly activities which are going on.
I would encourage people to come to the MCOM Center and see the Indian American exhibit so that you can learn about immigrants. I think immigration is the story of America, and especially with the political situation at this time, with so much of talk about immigration, I think this is so timely to come and see this exhibit. Immigration is not something of the past, it's still happening, and I think it'll continue to happen in the future.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.